Good afternoon and welcome to the February 24th regular council meeting. I call the meeting to order at 1 p.m. Are we good? What is that?
Press the red button.
Excuse us for one moment, please, until we're good? Okay, we'll carry on, please. I've called the meeting to order at 1 p.m. Going down the agenda, item A, added items, I will ask my council members if they have any added items to today's agenda. If not, then I will then move to item B and ask for a motion, please, to adopt the agenda as presented. Oh, Deputy Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Excuse me, I make the motion for the regular and closed council meeting agenda be adopted for Monday, February 24th, 2025 at 1 p.m. as presented.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Item 2, adoption of previous minutes. These are your minutes from February 10, 2025, and I would be asking for consent. If you have any questions, please note. I see no questions, so we have consent for the minutes for February 10, 2025. Moving down to item 3 on your agenda. Delegations and presentations, page 6 of your agenda. I am going to ask CAO Williams, who will be speaking to the Protective Services Quarterly Report. Before I move there, I will note we did have a change on the agenda to move item 3B to 7B on your agenda. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Dahl, and Director Andrews with us to lead us through the Q4 report for Protective Services. Justin.
Thank you, and starting with our quarterly report for the fourth quarter of 2024. Looking at our statistics, the year finished off fairly strong and consistent, which was a good thing, I think. As far as the call-outs specifically of mention, a couple of them that are worth mentioning is the weather was somewhat mild and we didn't see the activity that we normally would on the highways, so that accounted for a slower quarter for us, which was a good thing, obviously. Unfortunately, January of this year is completely opposite and our numbers are already above average, so one, you take the bonus and the next you pay for it. So the one area that we do want to call attention to is that we look at our false alarm responses, and even though in the urban setting 31 seems like a high number, we looked at the overall picture of quarter 4 and for the entire year, and we've seen a substantial decrease in those fire alarm response callouts, which has been a very problematic area for us in the years past, and we're really proud of the work that's done, and that came mostly from the changes in our bylaw and also with the incorporation of the billing process that was put in place. And so in this, it doesn't break down, but that fourth quarter statistic of fire alarm response, most of those are, if not all of them, are for commercial systems. And that before was one of the smaller areas for us, and the residential was the out of hand statistic. And we've actually seen a decrease that we haven't been to a residential false alarm yet in 2025. And in our fourth quarter, I would venture to guess that we're only looking at maybe a handful of that 31 responses being residential, which that's a huge burden to be relieved of, and we're not paying for firefighters to respond to calls needlessly and initiating unnecessary callouts. So that's definitely a win that's worth mention. Coming down to the numbers here, as far as our average firefighters per incident, again, those numbers seem low, but when we take into account our medical responses where we would see 2 firefighters respond typically, that's why the number is so low. But healthy, so there's no concerns there. Of significant mention in quarter 4, the Olds Fire Department responded to two incidents that were substantial in nature, and I'll speak to that a little bit later on. But again, it's not outside of the realm of our day-to-day activities. In our accomplishments and challenges, again, so I mentioned the two significant incidents prior to Christmas that have a substantial drain on resources and required increased support. And they were reported through the media of incidents involving loss of life. And so that does have a profound impact on our members, the people that are responding in the community. And so to have two 1 week apart was substantial for our people. And so we've been working to manage the impacts and move along with that, which I think we've been pretty successful at, but it's certainly not something that we want to see happen again. The substantial number of EMS incidents that we're being called to but are not required for have been increasing as of late, and we've made some on-the-fly changes in our operational deployment model. And so the example I'll give is that we have predetermined call determinants where if somebody has a substantial injury or illness and it meets a marker where the EMS unit is more than 17 minutes away, or the nature of the injury or illness is substantial enough that breathing may be affected, or they might have heart problems, we'll automatically dispatch the fire department as a co-response agency. And the problem is that this information is all based on second or third hand info. So when somebody calls in and gives information, it may not be the most reliable. And so what happens is that fire gets dispatched out, and then when we arrive on scene, if we arrive on scene, EMS may have already stood us down because the call was not as substantial as it was indicated. And so we really hate responding to those types of calls, and it's not because we don't want to do them, it's just not necessary, and it impacts all of our firefighters' daily business, whether they're at work or at home, whatever, and it necessitates a cost to us to pay firefighters to do that. So what we're doing now is with the on-call model of the chief officers is that if we see a EMS call that fits into one of these categories, we'll actually contact EMS dispatch before we ever send out our people to see if we are actually needed or not, and so we'll hold our response. And so as a result, we've seen a decline in the number of call-outs this quarter, which is in 2025. So hopefully we've got it fixed for the time being, and as long as we can continue to monitor that, that does have a positive effect on the members. And again, that wouldn't be possible with the old model before we had chief officers on call to take that information and then act on it quickly. So one of the advantages of having that 24-hour supervisory ability in place. A couple of our accomplishments, we did have a successful recruitment process. So we have the fire cadet program running again, and we have 6 new students from the high school started with us in September, and doing the level 1, which is that means they're brand new to the program. And then we had 5 returning from last year to do the more advanced level, and that started in January, so that runs January till May. As far as our dollar lost statistics, we've seen a substantial decline in the commercial fire losses in the last year, but definitely in the fourth quarter. We're seeing that's the benefits of having an active investigation and inspection program. So we're just not seeing the dollar loss incidents, meaning that there's no fire incidents occurring within our community. Now, statistics are a dangerous thing, that today they can tell us a great story and all we'd have to have is one fire, and then it could look terrible because it could be $1 million loss tomorrow. But we're seeing this being more of the norm as opposed to the exception. And that's a great thing, that we're seeing the benefits of having that resource of a fire inspector in place and eliminating those dollar loss impacts in our community. Next one into municipal enforcement, looking at our statistical area here, or our demographics. Again, a lot of these numbers come across the board pretty regularly as far as our number of incidents and the busiest day of the week. We hope you like the dashboard there that gives you a good picture of where our officers are spending their time and what kind of incidents come up. This does change from quarter to quarter based on the seasons as well. So, of course, when I give you first quarter for 2025, you'll see probably more incidents of things like sidewalk related and snow and ice and stuff like that. We looked at the Zone 4 being the area with the highest number of complaints. And again, this is just a statistic, but it shows you kind of the core area of town with the infrastructure in place with sidewalks and a lot of residential as being a prime location for the concerns that were brought forward in the last quarter. Our tickets that were issued in Q4, so 40 bylaw and 22 provincial, and then 7 provincial traffic. Again, that shows a pretty wide base of issues that are being resolved or being looked at. Please understand, though, in this case, that when we do write, some bylaw tickets will automatically be elevated into a provincial citation if the voluntary payment option is not taken. But in these statistics, we're trying to keep that separate, so we look at this number right now as being the pure number of provincial tickets issued immediately from the time of infraction. Some of our challenges, again, the current situation in the judicial program, the courts, seeing the increased pressure with prosecution and the requirement for us to disclose information and attend court. Has a strain on time and people. And some of the more complex files that our officers have been working on over the last few months with unsightly premises. Unfortunately, it does take time, but that persistent work and time does pay off as we see some positive results with actions being taken, whether it's voluntary or legislated. So we're continuing that work into 2025. Some of the significant accomplishments, we achieved a benchmark where we had no backlog of complaints to be followed up on. That was about mid-December, where basically we didn't have anything in the queue where people were being delayed for a response. So if somebody was reporting a situation, it could be followed up within an immediate time frame. It wasn't that we had 6 other files to deal with before we could follow it up, which has been great. And as a result, we're being able to shift a little more into a proactive enforcement activity, which is meaning more avid patrols and or going to look for problems or things that need to be resolved as opposed to hearing about them from complainants. We've had some successful opportunities to collaborate with our crime reduction unit position with the RCMP to conduct uptown business visits, so going door to door in the uptown community, looking for feedback and information of concerns of our commercial base. And we also had the opportunity to conduct a parking blitz in the uptown, trying to increase education and enforcement on the parking restrictions there, which will continue into 2025. Next is emergency management. So not a whole lot of activity with emergency management in Q4, but we are looking to try to get off to a good start in 2025. But the community participation piece, we haven't had a lot just because there's not a lot of material that comes out. But that's going to ramp up around May when we look to do our tabletop exercise. So we'll be looking for community engagement and information awareness. The big one that we see continuously is that emergency management does fall a little bit to the corner of everybody's desks. And so when our successful emergency management team relies on so many players of the organization for everybody to find the time at the same point to be able to focus on their duties as emergency management does prove difficult. So we do look for opportunities to enhance that in the year coming ahead, hopefully with collaboration and movement of the office should make it a little bit easier with everybody together. Accomplishments, we've conducted the initial Voyant Alert training session, which is a communication tool that we will be using in the community to notify of emergent situations and push out vital information quickly if the need arises. We've hosted a couple of courses, being the Incident Command System 300, and we did the Rail 101 and 201, which is for emergency management team members, which was a great thing to have in our community. And we have progressed with the drone training for our study program that we're doing with the University of Alberta, and are looking at how we can leverage that opportunity into enhanced emergency management readiness and response going forward, which there's lots of new technology and opportunities coming up in the next year that we will completely pursue. So looking ahead, given some of that already, but onboarding for a recruit class of regular members for the fire department is already happening, and we have an additional 4 regular members that are going through the training to be members. Touched on the medical assist. Our business plan implementation and presentation will be coming shortly here in the next month, and a revisit of our master plan from 2019. Hopefully within Q2, I believe our goal is to present the master plan as it was presented in 2019, give you benchmarks of what our accomplishments are and what are some of the gaps or areas that we want to look for going forward. Municipal enforcement, we're in the hiring process right now for the new CPO, so we hope that that position can be in place in mid-March. Business plan presentation, obviously, and implementation, the same thing with fire and emergency management, and we're continuing our proactive enforcement activities as the time and weather allow. Emergency management, again, we're looking for the spring full-scale mock disaster, which will involve a train derailment scenario, and we'll provide more information when it comes about what that looks like in everybody's part. We're going to complete the staff training and initiate the Voyant Alert system, and engage with the community on the sign-up process for those that wish to receive the information available. And we're going to take a proactive response or a stance on emergency preparedness programs in the school. So we're going to focus our engagement with the grade 3 classes of all the schools locally. Grade 3 is the target just because they are the most likely to take the information from professionals and then take it home and then regurgitate it and pursue their parents to follow up on it. So it's actually a calculated area of focus. So that's our plans. So that was a lot to be said in a short period of time, and I'm happy to take any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you for your report. It was well written. I open the floor to council for questions. Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to Director Andrew. I have a question on the emergency management on page 13 there. When you talked about the trail derailment scenario, do we tap into resources from CP to do this at all? Like, I know that we have had some support from in the past from groups outside of town and in town and whatever, but I was at a session that they were talking about CN has, availability of financial support or even resource support, and I'm just wondering if we get that from CP, because I think that's the main rail line through our town, is it not?
Yep, no, that's a great question. So yes, absolutely, this is in collaboration with CP, and so they do have funding available to help make this exercise possible and resources. So without spoiling the details, but they bring in things like rail cars and their emergency response team to help conduct the exercise, because it fits a need for them that's mandated through the federal government of, they have to do so much of this planning themselves. So yeah, so the exercise will involve a simulated train derailment. It's not going to happen right in town because we obviously don't want to disrupt anybody, but we are actually looking at the potential of using the siding north of town as being that location, and so they actually will take that portion track out of service for a period of time to facilitate it. So very heavily invested as far as CP Rail goes for this. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to the director. And my spidey senses tingled a bit when you talked a little bit about the EMS response and altering your schedule. And in my advancing years, I'm becoming increasingly vulnerable in that demographic health-wise. So I just want to make sure, one, that I've got access to that Life Pack machine if and when I need it. But more to the point, can you talk a little bit about EMS and the ability to respond? I know during the pandemic there were, code red or code orange alerts, and there were ambulances and EMS folks being shuffled kind of all throughout the province to respond. What are we seeing these days? Do we have an appropriate source of, support in that area, or is there still a vulnerability given everything that's going on with AHS?
Yeah, so as far as the status with EMS, what we're seeing in this community, we do have a very strong EMS presence, and that's due, I think, mostly in part to Olds has been determined a main logistical hub for EMS. So the model that they run is that if an ambulance in Olds is dispatched on a call somewhere, they have parameters in place that if they see that Olds doesn't have an ambulance available for a period of more than, I think it's 20 minutes, they start to relocate resources closer to Olds or into Olds, because their statistical generation looks at it and says that there's a higher percent chance that the next call that's going to come will be in the Olds demographic. So they're always moving ambulances here if there isn't one, which is a really reassuring thing if you're a resident of this area, because very seldom do we actually go on calls where we, as the fire department, first respond and are on scene for any amount of time before EMS actually arrives. So that is a rarity, for certainly in some areas for sure, but it's a good one for us. So, you know, I feel very comfortable that EMS is adequately resourced here at the current time. That being said, it's only as good as the current situation. So if another community is short, you know, such as the bigger centers, they will draw resources away, and so any point in time that could change. So there's always that bated breath thing where, you know, one bad day in one community could lead to a domino effect of resources being pulled away. So we're always minding that, but again, knock on wood, we don't witness that on a regular basis here at all. And our members are continuing to train to the high level of medical first response that's required so that they can utilize the equipment such as the Life Pack and our Lucas CPR device and all the other fun gadgets that we have. But yeah, it's definitely a liquid situation, and I would be foolish to think that the ramifications of what's going on with AHS don't, you know, ripple around to Olds, and whether that's good or bad, I don't know yet.
I actually saw a site in the last couple of days where there was an ambulance on the flat deck of a back of a truck. Was it coming to your building?
There was a replacement. I think that there was an ambulance that struck a deer the other day. So yeah, there was. You didn't see that one leaving, I think, but yeah, there's certainly movement of units for sure.
Thank you. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to Director Andrew. One of the challenges you highlighted in the report for our municipal officers, the amount of time that they now have to dedicate to the court system. Are we collecting any data on the amount of time our peace officers are now allocating to the court and to court prep, so we can get a better idea of how much time they're actually able to work in the area on enforcement itself?
Yes, so we are, I didn't have it collected in the fourth quarter to give you a specific report, but we are keeping track of that now going into Q1 of 2025. We're looking right now, without giving you a specific time, but we are looking at roughly 50% of our citations issued are seeing court now, or requiring the follow-up to disclose the information to court. A lot of the cases never actually see the inside of a courtroom because they're dealt with prior to through negotiation with prosecution and the defense. But yeah, 50% is a pretty high number for the time that we spend initiating infractions for sure. So we will definitely give you that in Q1 next year, or next quarter for 2025, with some time frames around it.
Thank you. Back to Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to the Director, a very quick question. I've seen reports on mostly in the news about other fire jurisdictions utilizing drones for fighting structural fires. You referenced drone training going on, I think, in the context of emergency management. I'm just wondering, is drone usage for fighting of structures something we could look at, we are looking at, or we're doing already? Thank you.
Yeah, it's really been an exciting process for us being involved in this study, and so in the last year we've learned a lot of different things about how they operate and the operational benefits that drones would play, in not just in firefighting but in emergency response in general. And so when we look at what we've been doing for the last year and how it's affected us positively, is Obviously, the one area we've used a lot that's had some success is looking for missing people. And these are events that are pertaining to the RCMP, so we're working in collaboration with them. But as far as the firefighting piece goes, we've got a couple of new avenues that we're pursuing. And so one is that in the spring, we're looking at doing some prescribed burning in the urban interface area of the Highlands, where there's some concern about some vegetation accumulation in the areas behind the properties on Briegel. And so we're going to take a look, and we actually have a data spatial analysis team from the university going to come out, fly with a drone, and they have developed software that they can determine the fuel loading of dead vegetation in an area. And so based on that calculation or that identification, then they can identify a risk hazard rating to it. So they're going to do some work because they're trying this out to apply to forestry firefighting for like wildland fires. And then the proposed action is that we're going to take a look with their equipment and their data, and then we're going to do a prescribed burn in that area to alleviate the area of that dead material, which also helps promote new growth and rejuvenates the floor, forest floor, and or the grass growth in that area, and makes it a more diverse habitat. And then look at the after effects. So that's kind of the neat science stuff that we're doing with the drone as far as firefighting. The other thing, we just sent a member up to Edmonton to do some collaborative training with Edmonton Fire Rescue last week. And Edmonton is using drones on a regular basis there, where any large-scale fire that they respond to, they send a team out to fly a drone. And they're utilizing the drone to identify hot spots and direct firefighting efforts in areas that would be inaccessible by people. And so in particular, an example I'd give is you have a large building on fire. They fly the drone way up above it at 400 or 500 feet, and they point down with the thermal imaging camera to see where all the hot spots are. And then the water stream from the aerial ladder truck would be directed based on the drone camera, as opposed to having to have somebody up in the basket of the ladder truck looking through smoke and steam and whatever that you can't see. So they can actually see the fire, see the hot spot. They moved the remote control monitor that we have on the ladder truck and put out the fire. And so there was a fire in Edmonton 2 weeks ago in the cold spell, and it was on the news, and that was one that they used specifically for that purpose, and made it a lot safer and a lot more efficient for them to put the fire out faster. So those are the kind of things that we're working on and we'll be trialing and doing as we progress with the drone, for sure. So it's exciting, and lots of benefits coming for sure.
Thank you very much for answering our questions today. I'm going to move over to Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council accepts the Protective Services fourth quarter report as presented.
Very good. We have a motion on the floor. Those in favor? That's carried. We are going to move down to page 30 in your agenda, please, at this time. And item 3C, development permit. Welcome, Nate.
Here we go. Good afternoon, Council. This afternoon, I have a single application for you. It's excuse me. It's the enclosure of an existing deck with a variance to a rear property line. It's a variance of 1.01 meters, which is a 17% variance. The deck had previously existed as a legally non-conforming addition. The landowner, after it was legally added onto the parcel, added on an enclosure to it, which per the MGA qualifies as a significant structural alteration, making it have to acquire a development permit and a variance to continue being legally located on the parcel. Pretty straightforward one. I don't have anything else unless anyone has any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Development Officer. I'll open up to the floor. Councillor Daly.
Mayor Dahl, through you to Development Officer Nathan, on page 34, it looks like this property has a few non-compliance issues I see on here. It looks like the garden shed and the covered deck and of course the rear deck is not in compliance. Is this, has any of these been dealt with in another permit application or process through the town?
In this, excuse me, in this application, we're dealing with items number 4 and 5. Item number 3, we have not addressed with the applicant at this point. It encroaches with this eaves onto municipal lands, and so it's a little bit more complicated. I'm in communications with the applicant, but we don't have any applications at this point to address that.
Excellent. Thank you for that work.
Yes, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to the development officer. I just have a very wide-ranging question. So this is a retroactive, a request for a retroactive approval for the variance. There are no safety issues, access to above-ground, below-ground infrastructure right-of-way, no visual impairments or impediments or anything that we're aware of that would say maybe this shouldn't exist? Like, there's no issues there, are there?
Yes, that's correct. Our department doesn't have any concerns with this application.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? Well, thank you for sharing that information. I would ask for a motion, please. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council approve development permit application DP 25-021 as presented, subject to the conditions listed in the attached draft development permit.
Very good. We have the motion on the floor. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? Did you have your hand up, Deputy Mayor? Thank you. That's carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Hill. Moving down to bylaws now, item 4 on your agenda, page 41. This is a boring bylaw, and we're looking for all 3 readings. Did you need to speak? CAO Williams.
Thanks, Mayor Dahl. Just more of a reminder, I'm sure you've seen it now for your 4th time, but we do keep a line of credit with ATB Financial, our lending institution, for the amount of $500,000 as a just-in-case scenario for emergency funds. It's not something we generally access, but we do, and most other municipalities do, like to keep this online just in case. So, happens every year. Unless there are any questions, we're asking for all 3 readings plus unanimous consent today. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that update, and we'll just start with first reading and move forward from there. Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that bylaw 2025-04 being a borrowing bylaw to establish a line of credit with ATB Financial for the purpose of paying operating expenses be introduced and given first reading.
Thank you, and we've been explained by our CAO once again, the purpose. No questions. Call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Second reading, please. Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that bylaw 2025-04 being a borrowing bylaw to establish a line of credit with ATB Financial for the purpose of paying operating expenses be given second reading.
Thank you, Councillor Daly. I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Unanimous consent. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that unanimous consent be given to presenting borrowing bylaw 2025-04 for third reading.
Third, we're looking for unanimous consent. Those in favor? That is carried. And third and final reading, please. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Make the motion that bylaw 2025-04 being a borrowing bylaw to establish a line of credit with ATB Financial for the purpose of paying operating expenses be given third reading.
I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. We'll move down now to new business. In your agenda, page 45, item 5A, Family and Community Support Services. This is our 2025 grant allocations. And do we want to, would you like to speak to this first, Director Lapointe? We'll speak to it first and then we'll go forward. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, afternoon, Mayor Dahl and Council. Today, administration is presenting the Family and Community Support Services grant recommendations for Council's review and approval. As you may know, the Town of Olds, FCSS, works with other regional providers to adjudicate the grant applications received to ensure program criteria is met, funding duplication is minimized, and impact maximized. What Council sees here today is the final list of recommendations resulting from that process. And just to clarify, eligible programs include initiatives that help communities identify social needs and develop responses, promote volunteer work in the community, inform the public about available services, help families strengthen family life and function effectively, enhance the quality of life for retired and semi-retired people, and then finally, support children and family social development. With that, if Council has any specific questions, Supervisor Dixon or I will be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you for that introductory, Director Lapointe. Before we put a motion on the floor, does council have any questions for any Director Lapointe and his staff? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to Director Lapointe. Not sure if you could answer this question or whether you'd have to pass it along, but do we hold back any funds for granting purposes for later on in the year in case an issue arises?
I believe the amount in the budget is, do you want to answer? Okay.
So in previous years, what you might remember is that we would hold back an amount. Yeah, so that's slightly changed. And what we do now is in our budget, we have different lines that would be very much connected to what the province has asked us to work on for some of those social preventative programs. And so, for example, like last year, we had a Spark Carnival. So there's money in that line of our budget in order to partner with another group that comes into our community or someone else in our community that is going to do some sort of a program or event that fits with that alignment with the province. So it's not a grant, as you may remember previously when a group would come, but it's more of a partnership opportunity. And it makes sure that we are aligning with the province a little better than we would have in the past.
Okay, so there is money that's held back?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, I should have just, yes, there is, but it just looks different.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering because it didn't say here, and I know that in the past we have had money held back, so thank you very
Yeah,
much for that.
absolutely.
Okay.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to the Director. I'm just wondering, for the most part, these are relatively small dollars, save for maybe one or two or three instances. Do we request from the organizations an after report to say, here's what was done and how it was executed, how many people were affected or touched? Thank you.
We absolutely must do that in order to report everything back to the province, and that's done annually. So we get all of that information, yes.
Councillor Ryan? Further questions from council? Very good. We have 8 recommendations for a total of $53,850. I'd ask for a motion, please. Okay, Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council approves FCSS grants for 2025 as recommended by the administration, and they are listed in our agenda package.
Very good. We have a motion on the floor. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And thank you for your explanation for council. Item 5B, page 51, please. This is our communications strategy. Before we put this on the floor, would you like to speak to it, or we can move right forward? Thank you.
Just going to hand over to Director Lapointe again to walk us through this one.
Thank you again. Administration is pleased to present the Town of Olds communication strategy again for Council's review and approval. Well, not approval today, just for review today. One of Council's strategic goals focuses on enhancing communication both externally with residents and internally with town staff. This strategy serves as a guiding document to help achieve that goal by providing clear direction, structure, and guidelines. Strategy is designed to support and inform other foundational documents, including the corporate plan that is forthcoming. And key areas of focus within the strategy include enhancing workplace culture, ensuring more consistent public messaging, strengthening communication within the community, defining a clear vision for the organizational communication and the role of the communications department in fostering collaboration, optimizing internal resources for maximum efficiency, establishing clear public engagement standards. And this is more about ensuring appropriate level of engagement for different types of decisions rather than consulting on every issue. Developing a timeline and allocating resources to support both council strategic goals and the successful implementation of communication strategy. And administration has reviewed current town policies and incorporated relevant information wherever possible into the overarching strategy. Moving forward, administration believes a review of existing communications related policy is appropriate, which we are happy to bring forward to the next service level discussion. And ultimately, this document provides a strong foundation for improving communication practices within the town of Olds, while also ensuring alignment with council's vision. With that, Supervisor Tollner or I are happy to answer any specific questions you have regarding the strategy.
Thank you, Director Lapointe. I found the internal communication process read very educational, taught me a lot about who does what, so I'm very respectful for this information. I'll open the floor to council if they have any questions for you or your staff. Seeing none? Oh, you do? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I don't really have a question, I just have a comment, and I did find this very interesting. I think it's a long time overdue, and certainly it addresses a lot of what I was looking for, so I appreciate the work that was done by our staff on developing this, and look forward to seeing this going forward, being utilized. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and similar to Councillor Ryan, I don't have a question, just more of a comment. Look forward to this coming back to council. I'll stew on it a little bit more, but my only comment would be, I think we've had some learnings as we've proceeded with various initiatives with administration over the last couple of years, and we've come a long way, I think, with our communication, certainly with social media. My comment is, I don't usually say this, but more is probably better than less when it comes to communication, and getting out in front are two buzzwords, I guess, that I would use, and yeah, it brought a lot of clarity, and look forward to moving this forward. Thank you.
Williams, and then Councillor Blatz.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a comment on logistics of next steps. So this is just presented today for information. Council does have a service level discussion later this week where communications and engagement as a department will be part of that. Not only will the strategy be, reintroduced there, not necessarily gone through, but how it relates to the current communications related policies council currently has. If you recall from a few months ago, I did promise that, I think by February, then I lied and said by March that you would have the policies in front of you. So we're hopefully do that on Wednesday this week and then bring this back with what the recommended outline of that council policies, which I believe we're looking right now to reduce the number and kind of expand on the existing ones, jumping off from this strategy here. So you'll see it again very soon, along with the policies and how we see how those could fit, and then obviously brought back to an open session of council for further conversation.
Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and I just had a comment. I agree that this is a great strategy. I like the format of the whole document, something that I too have been looking for and have been asking for years. And I just want to say again to you on behalf of myself and probably council, thanks to your staff for their quick response, particularly in social media situations. They provide information and back up to that information, and I think that's great. So again, I just want to say thank you to you and your staff.
Thank you for that. I would like, Councillor Walsh, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I move that council accepts the communication strategy as information.
I would like to call for the vote. Those in favor? Thank you, and thank you everyone for being here, in case we had questions for you in the introduction. Moving down now to item 5C. This is a retail gap survey. It's on page 64 of your agenda, and our CAO has sent us this and will now present.
Thanks again, Mayor Dahl. And sorry, the copy I sent to you was ill-formatted, so this one will look a lot nicer than the one you saw on the weekend. But even though I have a role in this, Sandra Blythe, our Economic Development Manager, is going to lead us off through most of this report, as it was her who directed the consultant over the last few months. So Sandra, take it away.
All right, okay. Okay, I know everybody's seen the presentation already, so we'll just pop right through to the next slide. FBM is the consulting firm that did this study for us. At the end of the day, the strategy is really good news. There's lots of room for growth for retail in all commercial nodes that we have. Projections are really good, so there's lots of opportunity here. Olds is essentially a retail hub. We're looking at a population that we serve around 50,000 people, but there's potential to exceed that to about 48,000. We've got 800 square feet of retail space, but there's opportunity to grow that to about with another 300,000 square feet by 2034. All right. Retail spending right now, we're looking at about 7 million. If you put in auto and healthcare, I think it was around 900 million. So by 2034, with population growth and so forth, we could be looking at 893 million in retail spending. So that's great news. Okay. So these are 3 commercial nodes. Highway 27 is west is the fastest growing area. Of course, that's where all our big box stores are. So any new retailers looking for a space are probably going to target in there. That's where your big brands are and so forth. Highway 27 East, of course, is right along here. That's your transition area. Lots of vacancy in there, but it's a great place for those retail businesses that need even a startup like more affordable spaces. That's a great place for them. Uptown Olds, of course, has a 7.7% vacancy rate, but this is not any different than most downtowns in communities, and it's an opportunity for revitalization. So downtown improvement programs and going vertical. Many communities are looking at putting housing downtown, and especially the fact that we have a college here, students. Great location for student housing in downtown cores, and it creates excitement and movement in your downtown. Okay. So where do people shop? What we know is that the people that shop in Olds are for everyday needs, right? Groceries, things like that. But when you're looking at higher, more pricey items like, electronics, things like that, they're going to Red Deer. So those are opportunities for us. Bringing in some of those things that we don't currently have to give them other options and hopefully keep them here. So why do people shop elsewhere? It's the typical lack of variety. They want more specific brands, affordability, things like that. Pretty common response there. Okay. So as I said, we're looking at upwards of 300,000 square feet by 2034 based on projected population and so forth. So that's a lot of opportunity for us to go after certain types of brands. 7 to 10 acres of new commercial land is also required. Yeah, so new commercial additions, stronger existing options for retail spending locally. Okay. Okay, so the types of targets that we're looking at are in the areas of general merchandise, home and garden, fashion, dining, and so forth. So you'll note in the study, it identified certain types of brands to go after. So we do some of that, but typically we don't go in as government and say, hey, come to the community. It requires a business plan, prove that out. But we do tap folks on the shoulder sometimes and say, come consider us, and bring those advantages to them. Okay? So what can we do to support existing businesses? Marketing and visibility. We are doing tons of that. Over the last couple of years, we've increased our social media through Invest Olds as well as the town. Doing videos and so forth on our local businesses. I think Anne has done close to 60-some videos that are sitting in the pipeline and completed. So it's all about promoting our local businesses, but also extending that into the region. So we've also brought our Local First brand, which is all about supporting local business, into the region under the Central Alberta First brand. So we're kind of following up with the rest of the campaign in Canada and in the U.S. Business development resources. So this is really everything that came out of the study targeted all the things we're already doing with RBSN. So that is proving to be a huge asset to us as far as information sharing, providing training, workshops, and whatnot. And then collaboration opportunities, working with the Chamber and Uptown on different promotions, and there's some other opportunities coming forward. And then, of course, through the Brood survey. Once we have that done, there's going to be a whole host of things that come from that, in addition to workforce development and incentivizing things like this. So Uptown revitalization, that is a key target. Housing and facade improvements. So I believe we're having some of that coming forward today as well, and helping those smaller businesses improve the exterior of their businesses is always critical, especially for downtown cores. So you'll see many communities that do these types of things. So they're very positive to help local businesses. And I think that's it. Yep.
Thank you. It's okay.
Sorry, and I'll take over the last slide here just to talk about what's next as it does start to branch off into multiple other departments. So the report did a great job of somewhat telling us what we already knew in terms of what supports small town downtowns and what the town can do within its capacity and whether businesses may be able to set up shop here. But it provided us with great data that we can then share with the people who actually create the jobs, who build the businesses, who drive the economy. And that's what has been done so far, with just sharing the report with Chamber and Uptown. A lot more collaboration and engagement is needed, of course, on this with both of them. Also sharing the report with commercial property management firms, whether it be the Trinity Group, which operates the Cornerstone Shopping Mall, or the other complexes in town, to let them use it as whatever recruitment tool they may be able to use it for. Then with the ECDEV strategy, right now in an acronym-prone phase, Next Generation Economy Initiative and the Business Retention, Expansion, Workforce Development processes, this will become part of our ECDEV strategy going forward. So we're hopefully getting to the point now that people and even council can see that we have a lot of irons in a lot of fires. Our focus now is to start to bring those fires together, that we're trying a lot of different things to try to see what works, what can help housing, help business, and that has to be contained in one easily accessible, let's call it document, if not process. If not for ease of reading and understanding, then a certain deliberateness of how everything works together. Upcoming in 2025, after Bill 20 in 2024 did tweak the residential property tax incentive abilities of municipalities, which really didn't exist before, we'll be reviewing both of our residential and commercial property tax incentives and potentially combining them into one bylaw as well. Stagnant land is a kind word for, actually not that kind word, for land that has been sitting dormant for no particularly good reason. There's plenty of that. We are advertising recently and this week in the newspaper around the industrial lot the town now owns in the Southeast Industrial Park, and there will be other announcements to make soon enough on town-directed lands at least, but certainly looking to partner most importantly with existing landowners who have a lot of really valuable, very serviceable real estate that we can start to figure out what's the price point or what's the potential, and connect them with the developers and prospective buyers who approach us. As Sandra mentioned, the key finding here for us at this very moment is Uptown Olds. And what does revitalize downtown? Well, there's a few things, but the most important thing is customers. Businesses need more customers to shop at their business, and the town can't force people to shop locally. We can't force people from other communities to come here, but we can enable developers to build housing close to these businesses. And that really is what the report tells us, what we thought we already knew, that you have to densify your downtown. And you'll see it in the housing strategy, which will be coming forward hopefully sometime in late March, which would then go to engagement and even with the land use bylaw reviews. But it also aligns with decisions council's already made the past 24 months, perhaps longer, changes to density, changes to height and parking, maximums and minimums, the marketing plan, which is about to get underway, event support through Mountain View Power and general sponsorships, trying to increase that event tourism process. So it's good to have someone else tell you that you're on the right track, but it does involve much more deliberate effort on our part to codify, to make more permanent some of these changes. And then the last piece, which is not so coincidentally, but I'll call it coincidentally, the next part on the agenda isn't touched on in the commercial gap analysis, the benefit of having a storefront improvement program. And I'll leave it there. I shall not steal Guy's thunder, but happy to take any questions on this report or the presentation that you just heard.
Thank you. We also have our next item, storefront improvement program, so thank you for sharing that. We'll learn a little bit more there. Questions? Councillor Ryan?
I hate always being first. I just have a question with regards to drilling down the specifics of some of the areas that you talked about, or that Ms. Blythe talked about with regards to, targeting merchandising and these kinds of things. When we did the study, did they specifically design, target certain businesses that we can go out and actually approach? Because, from my, I know I did the survey myself, and I said, okay, I think we need this kind of business or that kind of business. Did that do that? And obviously, we can't go into all the details of the results or the recommendations that come out of this, but did they do that? And can we target those? And is that something that we're going to do?
Yeah, good question. The report does get into specifics about actual corporations we could target based on other retail markets our size. I won't name names, but I can give you two. One says The Brick, but they're already here. That was a mistake in the report. A second one was PV Mart, which we were actually in conversations with, but we all know how that went a couple weeks ago. But yes, the difficulty is, even though we want to engage directly with corporations, and we do, we want to be very cognizant that we're not trying to pick winners, I guess is the term, that because any business we bring in is going to have competition locally. So we want to make sure the market makes that decision, that this report is a great third-party assessment that, our current economy could handle a second, X store, for instance. But that's why particular names weren't mentioned in this presentation, but in the report there are several dozen potential businesses we could focus. And then obviously, as if your population starts to grow and our trade area through housing and through adjacent communities, then we can then gain further businesses we could then target based on that expansion to our retail area.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. And again, not a question, and I will hopefully make a brief comment, but it's well known around the table here, and certainly for me, that ECDEV, I think, is now, if it's not number one priority, it's 1A, particularly with the loss of Sundial, particularly with the loss, I believe, of West Steel. As I talk to people in the community, there's a growing anxiousness relative to moving Olds ahead in terms of growth. And when they say growth, they equate growth with industrial expansion. I think we've done a pretty good job on the commercial retail side as I drive around uptown and the community and you see new businesses, whether it's the bubble tea, whether it's the cell phone, whether it's Vips Cafe. But we need the big prize, and maybe not one big prize, but two. And so I'm encouraged to see this. But again, for me, from a revenue perspective, we all know, I'm not saying anything nobody knows around this table, but ECDEV is it for me right now as a priority. And as I said, I'm encouraged with this, and maybe once we finalize our communication strategy beyond this forum here, this would be some good information to share with the public. Because again, as I talk to people, the word I hear is Olds just seems to be moving sideways from an economic development perspective rather than taking some leaps and bounds and certainly replacing Sundial and so on. So good starting point. Thanks.
Any other questions from council at this point? All right, well, I'd just like to thank your staff and Sandra very much for your presentation, and I call for a motion, please. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council accepts the Retail Gap Survey presentation as information.
I will now call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving down to page 65 of your agenda, please. Item 5D, this is Mountain View Power Storefront Improvement Program. Anything else to add from your previous comment? All right, then we'll just get the motion right on the floor. Who would like to make that motion? Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council accepts the Mountain
Yeah.
View Power Storefront Improvement Program presentation as information.
Sorry, Councillor Ryan, do you have a question?
I'd like to hear more details on it.
Okay. We'll see if our CAO can help you.
And I'll look Director LaPointe to lead us through this presentation.
Well, hello again. Administration is presenting the Mountain View Power Storefront Beautification Grant for Council's review today. And as you just heard, revitalizing Uptown Olds is an important component of the retail gap analysis. To support this effort, Mountain View Power plans to provide a $20,000 fund to support facade improvements in the Uptown Olds area. And the idea is really simple. Eligible improvements that help promote an engaging and inviting environment will be eligible for up to a $3,000 grant. Enhancements may include painting, awnings, lighting, and windows, among other things. Promotion of the program will begin in earnest starting tomorrow. Applications for this pilot program will be accepted through April 1st. And as always, I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, Councillor Blatz.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to either Director LaPointe or CO Williams. So this is our initiation to this program. Will we expand it, and will this be a continuation annually, will we see?
I think at this point it is a pilot program. We'll see how successful it is this year, and absolutely, if it is successful, I think we'll look at an annual program.
Perfect, thank you.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to the director, just a basic question or two. Will we do a before and an after? And will the funds be advanced up front? And we just trust the businesses to invest? And will we have some kind of an evaluation that says, hey, I repainted or I put up an awning and my foot traffic increased by 50%? Thank you.
Certainly a before and after. I think, again, it would make sense for us to request that as part of the application process. They provide a before picture and an after picture, and again, that will help us in marketing in the future. The second part of the question again, remind me?
I can't remember, but one was.
Reimbursement. Reimbursement.
Metrics to
Reimbursement.
gauge success, right? Increased foot traffic
Sure.
or whatever.
Reimbursement first. Again, I think the work would be completed first, and upon completion of the project, we'd actually reimburse the project itself. So that's the plan, so that we're not out of hand if in case the project does not move forward. In terms of metrics, that's a little bit more of a difficult one, I would say. Again, I think it is just going to be the vibe that we feel in the downtown. Unfortunately, it is a difficult thing to track for us to say, hey, I put up an awning my foot traffic has increased by 50%. So I think overall you'll see the slow build in the uptown area.
CEO and then Councillor Ryan.
Thanks again, Mayor Dahl. And just to tack on to Guy's comment, so getting back to ECDev, this is not a direct driver of economic development, but again, going back to the retail gap analysis, there is data from other communities and general research that a more welcoming and more pedestrian-friendly downtown core does lead to a more attractive downtown core, both for customers to shop in and for businesses to potentially set up shop in. Another piece, if I had to phrase it as, red tape reduction, I believe some of these projects, as if we get past year 1 into year 2, 3, 4, 5, it'll help us identify some of the hang-ups we have in our current land use bylaw regime, including the Uptown Olds ARP when it comes to design guidelines. I've heard some things already in terms of signage that may not be permitted, for instance. So as we enter into our LUB review, planning on reviewing our ARPs within the next 3 years. It also helps us kind of engage on some of those larger issues as well. So, yeah.
Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I just have a question with regards to where we would go past the pilot project. So I understand about identifying the need in the uptown core, and that's certainly a good place to start. But I would like to see if it results in positive results, and us look for further areas of town. In particular, we just finished talking about the gap analysis where we target the east part of Highway 27, and there's the west part of Highway 27. So there's a lot of businesses outside of the uptown core who could benefit from something like this. And I'd like to see at some point us expanding this if it becomes successful outside of the uptown core, because we do have other businesses in other areas of town that could actually benefit from this. And I look forward to seeing how this pilot project will run. But I do think we need to focus on other areas as well as uptown. And maybe that might be our focus for the first 3 years and then expand it into other areas after that.
Thank you for the information. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think it's a great idea as a pilot project to start something simple like this in a restricted area so that we know how it can work and how it can't work. CAO Williams, you brought up a good point. I think with the sign bylaw or sign rules within the land use bylaw, as well as the Uptown Olds redevelopment plan. The gap analysis brought up an issue of that pedestrian-friendly, walkable downtown shopping core quite a bit, and signage is a big issue on there. We know that a lot of communities are bringing their signs down to eye level, which means that as you're walking past a business, you can see the sign of that business rather than I can only see the signs across the street because they're 15, 20 feet high. And I do know that our Uptown redevelopment plan doesn't work that way, right, as it's written. Neither does our land use bylaw and the way signs are implemented. So I hope to see in the future how we can renegotiate that process between the three policies or three acts so that we can come up with a better solution moving forward into where we can make that pedestrian-friendly signage a little bit more effective in the uptown area. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. Any further questions? Seeing none, we have a motion on the floor right now from Councillor Cummings. And I will call the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We are now moving down to page 72 of your agenda, please. Item 5E, and this is a sale of a property. CAO Williams.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. As the RFD on the screen explains, the 60-day petition period for the property, town-owned property at 481 51st Street, closed on the 8th of this month with no petition submitted. The background here goes through some of the details of the process and what we experienced and a little bit of the rationale. I'll speak to it briefly just to remind council and the listening public of how we got here and what comes next. So much like what we've been doing with the men's shed at our small Quonset, at the old fire hall, with the food bank and community lending shelf to date, and what I mentioned earlier on with the industrial land from the growth area of the cemetery being instead listed for sale and industrial use. It is a review of town-owned properties and what is the best use of those properties. And our website, olds.ca/partnership, has a lot more information for the public at home on this item and other things. But this property, which I call the Large Quonset, aptly named due to the large Quonset sitting on top of it, has sat vacant since 2022 when we opened our sand salt shed at the new operations center. Through 2023, as council would recall, we approached a variety of local minor sports and recreation groups to see if there was opportunity, interest in making this an indoor sports field. There was interest, there just wasn't enough appetite based on the cost. Once you change a use from a uninsulated, unheated, unserviced, lack of bathrooms, no water, sanitary sand salt shed into a children's sports venue, there's obviously a lot of fire and safety code concerns that have to come into account. So that's where minor sports clubs, not surprisingly, bristled at the approximately $250,000 cost to make it a 3-season use. To make it a winter use, 4-season use would have been at least double that. That's when the recommendation to council was made to pivot to a construction use, construction idea. As this site, unlike the old fire hall and the small Quonset, it is not a brownfield site, meaning there's no hydrocarbon contamination under the soil. With the construction idea, the East Olds Area Redevelopment Plan came into play, which put a few more items into the mix, and that was largely the zoning. The intended zoning of this land is a mixed-use development, which is a fancy way of saying commercial on bottom, residential on top. Something that does not exist in East Olds in any meaningful sense, so it would be the first. On top of that, the demolition of the structure, which we weren't even able to obtain accurate costing on, just because before we demolish, we need to get certain studies done. Mold, asbestos as an examination, and then depending on the results of that study, that's when your cost to demolish, to haul away, and to landfill can be adjusted generally up. But it's safe to say $100,000 was the baseline, at least to demolish this building, so adding to that decision as well. Then back to the mixed use zoning, council did discuss this, and it was determined that we did not want to vary from the East Olds Area Redevelopment Plan, that mixed use was the way to go. So we were going to direct the type of development there on a lot that had at least $100,000 demolition fee. The idea of the partnership was really the only realistic way, which I recommended and council accepted. So I approached approximately 7 local-ish, whether operating in Olds or from Olds, builders active in the commercial and multifamily development space. And Master Build Projects was the one entity that submitted an expression of interest. No one else did, either through silence or direct declining. So then we entered into an MOU. They passed some due diligence, things like registry checks, corporate litigation checks, things like that. And the only outstanding issue was proof of experience. So since signing the MOU in the summertime, they have 7 active development and building permits under construction or approved. That is 6 single-family homes, 1 duplex, plus their Calgary experience as well. So we feel confident both in the due diligence and in the experience to move forward with this. So the property, as the deal says, will transfer for $1. And that would happen at the time the deal is signed, but it doesn't mean that the town is then on the hook for whatever comes next. There's kind of 2 main clauses built into that agreement. One is December 31st, 2025, which is the permit date. All permits must be submitted and approved by that time, development and building permits. So that may seem like an easy step, but before you can get a building permit approved with any municipality, you have to have things like engineer stamps, architectural drawings, And for a building that we're projecting to be at least $5 million, that's at least $150,000 touch. So there will be certainly in 2025 that bridge to cross. Then construction, demolition, and foundation, to be specific, must be started no later than August 1st, 2026. So all that said, kind of restating, I believe, what council already heard many times, and then what's also on our website. It's not to say that lessons weren't learned from this particular avenue. This is the first time the town has ever done something like this, myself included. And certainly with the initial feedback we got, largely on social media, and hopefully we can then improve on how we engage, communicate, and even partner on such initiatives going forward. And hopefully even with our industrial land disposition, we're seeing a bit of lessons learned and how integrated into that process. But as mentioned or alluded to before in my previous comments, there's a few other potentials that will be upcoming. But we'll do better going forward. Always can do better, learn things, but it comes down to this is still a good project for the town. If it is successful, it will not only provide us with a return on investment through property tax dollars, it will provide affordable housing, it'll provide more retail space, which the gap analysis just said we need approximately 300,000 square feet in the next 10 years to accommodate the potential growth or risk it going to other communities. And hopefully, the main hope, personally speaking, is that it will demonstrate the business case for mixed-use development in what we call the transition zone of East Olds. And it's something less certain, but worth striving for. So even though we're trying to do better as we go forward, managing and potentially disposing or partnering for town lands, this is still, in our opinion, a solid project to proceed with. So any questions, I'm happy to take.
Thank you, CO Williams, for that full report back. And Deputy Mayor, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I'll give Councillor Ryan a bit of a breather here. And I thank the CAO for adding a lot of color to the background there. Much appreciated. I'm cautious about this initiative. I do like where it's going, particularly on following the retail gap analysis that we've just heard and everything we've heard about housing and affordability and revitalizing the East Olds. I have had a few folks certainly flag me down throughout the town and talk about this initiative. I do applaud and like its innovativeness, creativity, out-of-the-box thinking. A comment I hear occasionally is, don't interfere with the free market. But I think the benefits and the approach we've done and followed with administration give me some comfort in that area. My one area of caution is what safeguard or guardrail do we have to, and you talked about two key dates, I think December 31 and August 1 of 2026. Beyond those dates, what assurance do we have that, I don't know, Master Build or whoever doesn't take this property and flip it in 3 years' time? When I'm dead, everybody around this table has moved on. What assurance do we have that there isn't a flip and property values have skyrocketed as they continue to do? Thank you.
3 years, that's generous, yeah. So with Safeguard, so the deal's written, besides the two dates you mentioned, to get the building built. So let's say flip. If the building gets constructed to our standards, because remember that this doesn't speak the unspoken obviousness that we have to approve the permits and the design as well. So that is another safeguard in here, the zoning in itself. In addition to the permit process. But if it's talking in hypotheticals, that if they build it and it works great and it's a great building, that they can then sell it for a profit, that's the free market. But your comment about the free market, interfering in the free market, and I would agree largely too, but also that the Municipal Government Act provides municipalities with natural person powers to enter into contracts and deals. And this is town-owned land, so we do have that agency. The second thing is that by not only zoning it into a use, a function that doesn't yet exist in an area, and then not only, even though selling it for $1, but directing the development based on what we want to see there, that is in itself, interference. But that's what zoning is. We want to build something to enable other things. So that the partnership is a bit more complicated than just saying the town is interfering in the private market. It is we're working within our legislative parameters to hopefully better the town.
Thank you for that response. We'll go to Councillor Ryan and then back to Deputy Mayor.
Unless it's supplemental.
I truly have a supplemental.
Oh.
For one of the few times, I truly have a supplemental. But I'll let Councillor Ryan go.
Okay.
I will go with Councillor Ryan, then Deputy Mayor.
All right. Thank you very much, Mayor Dahl. Through you to the CEO. I appreciate what you just said, and certainly to me, it's a win for the community because we're developing something that, on a piece of property that's just been sitting vacant and costing us money because we have had utility in there. So, and this is going to give us tax dollars. So I'm all in favor of it. I understand the cautious front that Councillor Wilson has had, but I do agree that this is something that is needed in our community, but also has been identified we just heard through the retail gap analysis. So something that people can utilize in the Uptown Olds area. Although it's in the East Olds area, it's still, I would classify it as uptownish. So I'm all in favor of this, and I'd be prepared to make a motion, except that Councillor Wilson has another question. So.
We also have Councillor Cummings, so Councillor Wilson, you have next.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to the CEO, and I'm less fussed, I think, about a flip in the sense of a build and flip, because as you said, we do have a degree of influence or input to the process. I'm thinking more, and maybe my question more specific, if the deadlines and the work requirements of December 31 with the permits, as an example, or August 1 with the demo aren't met, if one or both of those are met, does the property revert back to us? That's more my concern, is the developer chooses to do nothing and just sits and sits and sits, which we know can happen, and then he decides to flip it for something more than $1. Thank you.
So how the deal structure, what happens if one of those deadlines is not met? It does revert to the town. The caveat is if there should be a mortgage financing taken against it, we would be secondary to the financial institution. So we'd have to work with them to get the property disposed of or transferred. Now, even though it's a risk, it's no cash outlay to the town, no financial risk. And working with financial institutions, they tend not to want to let their investments sit either. So I'm not totally concerned, but to your scenario, because I know you can hypothetical to doomsday all day, they can't just flip it a vacant lot after they demolish it or have the foundation built. That deal does prevent that. So, but once it's complete and we waive our conditions, they can do what they want with it. So.
Thank you for that important information, CEO Williams. We'll go to Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I do have just a comment here. So like Councillor Wilson, several members of our community have reached out to me here to talk about this $1 sale. And the one thing I'm amazed at is how much power a lot of our citizens think we have when it comes to directing development in our community. And the reality is we don't have much. The only thing we have is financial incentives like this one. And although this type of financial incentive to development is new to Olds, it's not new at all. It's done by multiple communities around our province and throughout this entire country. So it's a very common process in which we will incentivize specific development, or a municipality direct specific development through financial incentive of the property that the municipality owns. So it is a well-established process. I know a lot of our community members were concerned about the $1 sale amount. But really, it's the only power municipalities have to control what is being developed in a community, is financial incentives such as this. So I'm a big supporter of this process because it is a development style that we want to kick off in this area. I'm confident after talking multiple times with our administration on how the program or how the contract is negotiated and set out, that these interests of the citizens will be the best managed through that contract, rather than, as Councillor Ryan initiated or commented on, just leaving a piece of property that we own sitting there doing nothing. So I'm a full supporter of this program. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would have to say also that our CAO and his staff have put copious amounts of hours into this project, and from past years' experience, a decade plus, this has been on a table, especially in the industrial area where they've tried to do this project in the past. So this is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for our community, so I would certainly support this as well. Does council have any more questions? Very good, then I would request a motion, please. Councillor Blatz?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move the council accept the report on the town-owned property at 4818 51st Street in Olds, Alberta, and direct the Chief Administrative Officer to finalize the property sale agreement.
Very good, thank you. I'll call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you for all your sharing, CAO Williams. We will be moving now to correspondence, page 74 of your agenda, item 6A. I would like to get a motion on the floor, and then I do have to speak to you with regards to some. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I make the motion that the correspondence and information report ending February 24, 2025 be received for information.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Other than any questions council has to this information, I will be speaking to page 81, Royal Canadian Mounted Police letter requesting municipal policing priorities. I will speak to that after any questions from council, and then I will speak to that. Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I just have a quick question through you to the CAO. I guess I'm just wondering, in light of Minister McIver's letter in response to your letter, specifically around RCMP and funding, and given what we know, I believe it was back in July, administration presented a scenario where a five-year forecast for RCMP costs were going to increase by something like $800,000 for the town, or roughly 37%, which will be an impact for the town and our taxpayers. Just wondering if the CAO has any guidance for this council in terms of further advocating, and do we follow, as Minister McIver said, and go through Canada Public Safety, approach the RCMP, and if we approach the RCMP, what avenue does that look like as far as further advocacy? Because clearly we have some challenges going forward, as we all know, again, with policing costs as it relates here to the RCMP and the five-year forecast on top of everything else. Thank you.
Yeah, all fair questions. So to break it into two parts, when you're talking about the report that you saw earlier this year, or later last year, rather, with the expected anticipated growth in our RCMP costs and staffing, that this will be also addressed in our corporate planning that's happening, specifically in protective services, but also with our housing strategy, because one of the ramifications of population growth is that it strains certain services, whether it be water, wastewater, recreation, policing as well. So that will be presented to council in various forms over the next, I would say even 6 months to discuss further. But the costs are unavoidable. They're going to grow, whether it be just through inflation, through collective bargaining, which didn't exist 5 years ago, for instance, that we're now obviously seeing the ramifications of, and to membership growth. With Minister McIver's letter, it's ironic that he's telling us to go directly to Public Safety Canada, but on the other hand, they're also restricting our ability to negotiate with the federal government. So I'll have to ask for clarity on how I'm allowed to speak with the federal government, perhaps, because it doesn't seem to be totally consistent with their messaging. But I would say it's everyone's fault, except ours, of course. But with the feds, as you would have heard if you've went to recent FCM conferences or meetings, they've been extensively engaged with public safety at the federal level around collective bargaining, and at least giving local governments a seat at the table to better understand and advocate for their positions. That's something that has cost significant dollars in recent years and will continue to do so. I also believe at the provincial level, they have essentially raised the rates on policing while decreasing their own rates. So there's only one taxpayer, but they're putting more financial pressure on local governments to fund RCMP services that are largely provincially led initiatives, whether it be the criminal code or other types of legislation that may be federal, but the province is responsible for managing. But municipalities are picking up the tab from both levels of government. So advocacy has to be continued. I'm just not sure if it's going to amount to much, but FCM at the federal level seems to have their points well made and connections made, and the province will see what happens with. There seems to be a new initiative every month, whether it be sheriffs in downtown Calgary or sheriffs at the border or federal agreements that we may or may not be able to enter into. So there's no clear answer right now, but we have to get more information and bring it to council, and we can only control what's in front of us, which is population growth and the police and study we had done last year, which demonstrated obviously some good things like our crime severity index, and not so great things like our lack of police officers in comparison to our population base. I could talk about this longer, but I will stop talking right now.
Thank you for that. Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the one letter that talked about the extension to the JUPA, JUPA, good acronym, it sounds funky. The 1 year extension to getting the JUPAs all done and over with here. Does Olds need that 1 year extension, or are we on track to actually get it done in the original timeline?
Thank you. CEO will answer that. I also asked him the same question.
We actually finished ours in 2023. So we have actually the Chinook's Edge and Red Deer Catholic were great to work with, and we came together and just made one for all three of us. So yeah, and I think it's Spanish for hoopa, I guess. No? That was my guess, but yeah, we'll agree to disagree.
All it is joint, that's what we know. And that brings me to my item on page 81. The letter came addressed to myself, and I just read it in the agenda, so I was a little late to respond, but the letter is requesting from our Staff Sergeant Wright that council provide our policing priorities for the coming year. So I would ask council if you would be willing, as we do have a motion on the floor for the correspondence, to make a second motion once we vote on this to direct our CEO to bring this back to us. Okay, so let's just deal with the motion on the floor right now. Or you have another question, Councillor Cummings?
Thank you. I'm just wondering if the opportunity that we have on Wednesday, where we're meeting already for service level review, would be a better opportunity for us to have a discussion first on what we'd like to see of this before we bring it back to a council meeting for voting on and then presenting to the RCMP. So I'm wondering if it's more advantageous for us to have this discussion on Wednesday.
Coincidentally, Corrective Services is part of Wednesday's discussion, and this has been added as an item. So that will be the venue if council wishes to be the venue. We'll bring it back to March 10th, if that works.
Thank you. Thank you for that question. That was really another side thought that I did have, because I knew we were meeting on Wednesday. So we'll just leave it in the agenda package then to receive for information with the other correspondence. As CAO said, he's bringing it back. Thank you very much, Councillor Cummings and CAO Williams. So we have a motion on the floor from Councillor Wilson then to accept the correspondence. Any further questions? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. And we'll see that on Wednesday. All right. Moving down to page 82 of your agenda, item 7A, reports from council. is where we're at right now. We do have reports in the agenda submitted from myself, Mayor, Councillor Daly, Councillor Ryan, and Councillor Wilson, so I will start a round table with Councillor Batts.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and as noted, I did attend all of the meetings and the chamber event on the, I believe, the 28th of January, which was well attended. Pardon me, a lot of opportunity to do some networking. I did attend a Mountain View Regional Water Commission meeting, and the minutes from that meeting are attached to this agenda, so if there's any questions from that, then I would open up if anybody has any questions.
Well, thank you, Councillor Blatz. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Councillor Blatz. Thank you. I did read through the Water Services Commission minutes, and I have a question on page 91, which talks about the Drought Committee and the flow updates. And I'm just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about whether or not you're seeing any kind of a trend. I know last year we had talked about a lot of concern with regards to drought in the province, and it might be a little bit too early because we're still, in freeze, but you wouldn't know it outside today considering how warm it is. And so I just thought I would ask if if they had talked at the commission level whether or not there's any, if we're trending towards drought again.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Ryan. Right now, we are just in we're trying to be more proactive than reactive. At this stage, we are monitoring the Dixon Dam flows, and in both January, up to January 30th and December, or January 30th and December 30th, we were at 70% full capacity at the Glenifer Lake Reserve. On the 30th of January and on December 30th, we were at 84%. So it is coming down, but again, we know that there will be the spring thaw. We also monitor the snowpacks at two different locations which feed our tributaries. One would be Limestone Ridge out west of Sundre, and also the Skokie Lodge, which we're monitoring. Both of those snowpack levels at this time are down, but we have no information to date from the government of Alberta whether we will be going into drought conditions, but I think we probably should be prepared rather than react to something later on. But I do have a meeting coming up March 12th where I'm sure we will discuss it further, and I will be glad to report back to council if there are significant changes coming forward. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
It answers mine because it does affect Glenifer Lake a lot too. Thank you very much. I've been following that very closely. All right, thank you very much for your report, and we'll start with Councillor Walsh. Next.
Thank you, Mayor. It's attended all regular council meetings and the Committee of the Whole on February 3rd. Attended an EDAC committee on February 11th. Notes are attached to this agenda, which are quite informative. And February 19th, I attended a library board meeting. Basically, spent a fair bit of time talking about our strategic plan. Every 3 years, they come up with a review of the strategic plan, and this is the year they're doing it. I think council can expect an invitation to their public session on April 8th in the evening, 5:30 to 8, for input into the strategy going forward. And a lot of organizations and individuals will be invited to present there and hopefully impact our programming going forward. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much for your report, Councillor Walsh. Now, Councillor Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So there's just really one thing I wanted to talk about, that's RDR MUG, the Red Deer River Municipal Users Group. So earlier last year, probably middle of last year, we updated our strategic plan in a short term to be revisited again during the next election cycle, because we had focused so heavily on getting a new reservoir and dam built on the river, and that's moving forward through the province right now. So we're just trying to redevelop how we're going to work with that process. We're also, and I know this has been a little hiccup with our administration, trying to get minutes from our meetings actually to us here. one of the things we're doing to try to correct that is we're reviewing and updating all of the society's mandated documents like our bylaws and such as that, because we are definitely not conforming with new regulations in that way. To that end, we've extended our executive committee, and I was elected to the executive at our last meeting in order to help facilitate that process. We have budgeted this year some money to fix our website so that we can provide the town a link to our website so that we can discuss more openly what was being done there, as well as provide links to our minutes and our historical track of our minutes and things like that. There is a request, or we have started a information session where we're talking about the new dam and reservoir process. And the RDR MUG has asked if all of us representatives come to our community and ask the community if this council would like a presentation on the new dam, the new proposed dam, and the effects that would have on our water supply, which we use in the Red Deer River. So that's just a question. If anybody wants to present or ask or say yay or nay, then I can reach out to the society and we can get that back on. Other than that, there hasn't been much going on anywhere. The only other association or committee that I'm on, of course, is the Waste Management Commission, and that's been running just smoothly.
Okay, thank you very much, and I think on behalf, I know that on behalf of our council, we would love to have a presentation to get an update on that. It sounds like the group is doing a fantastic job of trying to get everything pulled in together to share that type of information with all council members from each one of you, the reps. So thank you. Can you arrange that? That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll reach out to our administration and I'll get, we all know Rudy, I'll get Rudy to come out and give us a presentation on that. Thanks.
Good, and then you can just get a hold of our legislative clerk. We have no motion. Is anybody willing to make a motion to accept? Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Can I ask a question first?
You certainly can.
Thank you. I have a question for Councillor Daly or Councillor Walsh. If Councillor Walsh is attending these as well, what are you doing? What is the Brood Survey weekly update? What does that entail? You've got it on twice, and it doesn't say anything about. I'd like a little bit more detail, maybe a little tidbit or something.
All right, thanks for the question. So the Brood Survey update is a meeting that we have every Friday, and it's in regards to the uptake of the survey that's been administered. At the beginning of February, there was a launch that took place. I think everybody here attended it. So from there, then the volunteers have gone out and talked to all the businesses, the recommended businesses that were on the list. So this is the feedback that we're getting back from the businesses as far as how many people have completed the surveys, how many are incomplete, what is some of the red flags that we're hearing back from the businesses as a result of this contact with them. And so, yeah, it's basically an update. So like Friday I had another one and it just continues. We have milestones that we want to hit and meet. And so then, for instance, the businesses that I went to see, I can see what they've done in the survey, who's completed, who's not. And I'm, of course, as a volunteer, I'm going to go back out and visit those because the survey ends this Friday for everybody that's listening as well. And so midnight on Friday, the survey will close down. So I'll go out and meet with my businesses again and try to encourage more enrollment in the ones that haven't. So that's basically what it is.
Okay, thank you very much. It sounds interesting.
Are you sharing with us that this is geared for businesses for the survey?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Very good, because I do know that Shyla, our staff, has also sent council notification that it's the last chance, but that makes it much clearer for myself as well. All right, we have a motion on the floor, I hope, from Councillor Ryan.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I actually did have another question if you have a chance, and it's actually for you. I was wondering about the emerging trends. I wasn't able to attend that, and I don't know how many other members around the table were able to attend that. Did you as well, Councillor Cummings? You have your hand up. If somebody could just tell me and give me an idea of something that you may have learned out of that. It's interesting to see that you went to it, but I'd like to find out within how.
He was able to attend one, Councillor Ryan. I had a full day that day. Deputy Mayor Wilson and I believe Councillor Cummings attended the whole day. They'd be better to ask a question to. I got out of it what I wanted, basically just what lawyers talk about and the questions that I had, and I had about only 3 questions. Would anyone else like to update Councillor Ryan on the session?
I'm just concerned, I'm just not concerned, I mean, I'm just interested in hearing about something that may affect, the town of Olds or something you got out
Councillor
of it.
Cummings, go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I unfortunately don't have my notes from that session with me here today, but the email that was sent out for the link to it had the entire presentation in links. So it looked like an agenda, but when you clicked each agenda item, it went straight to a PowerPoint presentation on each of the points. So every piece of data that was presented was in that invite. So there's a lot of good information there. I think that there was a couple of things that related to the town of Olds, mostly in contracts for employment, but I think we've got that entirely covered since last year, where all of our employees are under contract and stuff like that. And I know our manager of human resources, I can't remember if that's his new title or not, was there. And we talked a fair bit about that, but no, there was nothing outside of the scope of that slideshow that was presented. So if you, I'll double check my notes to make sure there was nothing unique, and I'll come back to everybody if there's something unique that wasn't in the presentation.
The other person in the room for the session that I attended, the only session I attended, was Nate, our development officer, and so we all heard the same thing, mostly on zoning and East Old stuff was what I was trying to pick up on, and they did a very good job. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much. It's always interesting to hear if there was something that came out of that, and I wasn't aware that there was PowerPoint attached to that. I just noticed it on my calendar, and I couldn't go to it, so I didn't investigate any further. Thank you very much. I can make a motion that the reports from council, boards, committees, and commissions ending February 24th, 2025 be received for information.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ryan. I will call for the vote. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. We'll move now to our item that we moved to the end of the agenda, which will be item 3B, RCMP quarterly report, and we'd ask Staff Sergeant Wright if he would like to approach the council table. And thank you for your patience.
Good afternoon. I believe that you have before you the Q3 report, which is October 1st to December 31st of 2024. In your package, you should have a copy of a letter, as well as the municipal policing report and related statistics. Were there any questions arising from the report?
Had some observations that I thought were very well received, actually. One question that I still boggles my mind is, what's the difference between sexual assaults and other sexual offenses when you come to reporting?
Sexual assault itself is a specific act defined in the criminal code, whereas other sexual offenses are defined differently. Yeah, I mean, there are different sexual offenses defined within the criminal code. Sexual assault is in itself more or less an encompassing offense, but there are more specific ones that are unique.
Of course, it's the criminal code. That would only make sense. And I'll just do one more, and Councillor Blatz has a question. I I see the property damage in Mountain View County is actually down significantly. Is that uncommon for you to report that? It went down from 170, it went down to 106 for 24 from 170. That's a nice drop.
Sorry, which page are you on?
Oh, 16, sorry.
And that's for the town of Wolves, correct?
That's correct. January, December 2020, page 16.
Okay. Oh, motor vehicle collisions. Oh, I see, okay. And there's been a substantial drop this past year. There is no necessarily rhyme or reason for the drop. I'm pleased with the drop, of course. There just, for whatever reason, hasn't been a lot of fender benders. Yeah,
Going as fast. Councillor Blatz?
I would like to think so.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl, and through you to Staff Sergeant Wright. Can you just give us a little bit of update on body-worn cameras?
Body-worn cameras. Yes, I can. Body-worn cameras are the new technology that we've received to wear on our uniforms. As you can see, I'm not wearing one at the moment. I don't wear one for administrative purposes. However, they are given to each one of our operational members, constables mostly, who have public interactions. They're designed to capture their interaction, so then there's really no question as to what was said or done. In this day and age with technology, everyone has a cell phone and a camera. Quite often when there is some sort of different version of what happened out there, they rely on their own technology to display that. However, we have our technology, in which case we capture the entire event, not just a specific segment of it. So we have a broad capture, and we're able to look at that, hear the audio, see what happened in their interaction, make a determination whether or not whether it was appropriate or inappropriate. It's also used as evidence. It can be used for evidence as well.
Thank you for that.
I can assure you on Saturday, one of your staff that were on duty, I was doing a lot of work around town, was at the CLC and another function, and there was a lot of questions. He was explaining it very well, and people were very, very curious. So right now, today, they're working quite well. Councillor Daly?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to Staff Sergeant Wright. On your letter, or in your letter, page 29, you mentioned the Real-Time Operations Center. And this intrigued me a little bit in that if you could expand a little bit on this, is this a provincial-wide initiative, or does it go by region? And I feel that it's a great efficiency to responding to our complaints and to our citizens in their time of need, but could you just explain a little bit more on that?
Absolutely. In the olden days, whenever the constables were working and they required some assistance in terms of direction or coordination, they would contact their NCO or detachment commander at all hours to advise us what's going on, and then we would start giving direction. And sometimes it was in the middle of the night, and sometimes it was in the middle of sleep. And there's been many different, what's the word I'm looking for? There's been an evolution in terms of the Real-Time Operations Center. We used to call it KMOS. It's now called KRTOC. So we have staff sergeants typically working 12-hour shifts. So there would be several of them working a day shift, several of them working night shift, and they work 365 days of the year. So they're always working, they're always on, and they're always available to dispense advice, direction, call in support, coordinate an activity that's going on. With the technology we have, we can track the members and their cars, and we're able to give that direction today. And it does alleviate some of the pressures on the detachment NCOs so that we're not always on call 365 days a year. So it's great. It's countrywide with the RCMP. Every division has one. And in Alberta, our main KR Tech Center is out of Edmonton. And they're attached to the Operational Comm Center, which is our dispatch.
Supplemental, and then Deputy Mayor.
Thank you for that. And so is there, like, I can see that, you know, there's guidance for the constables and the officers that are out in the field. Does this also include, let's say, there's nobody available in a certain area, that this service can then dispatch somebody from a different area to come in to cover, or?
Correct. It's based on the closest car. Yes, exactly. So if there is, for whatever reason, say, our members are on the extreme west side of the detachment area, and we need to go to Wimborne quickly, if they will know where the Three Hills member is, and they can ask the Three Hills member to attend, and they'll get there first. So yes, they can see everybody on their screens, and they can coordinate the closest car until the Olds members are able to get in place.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Through you to the Staff Sergeant. Just wondering if Staff Sergeant is able to comment without giving away too much information with the upcoming G7 and staffing implications, if there are any, do we know of any for our area? Thank you.
It's a great question. It's a question I've been asking too, in terms of when will you need the resources and how many resources? I know in the past, being part of the detachment complement that stayed behind during G8, G12, G10, and several Olympics over the years, I know that quite often they require some resources from the detachments, if it's, especially if it's occurring in Alberta, and especially if it's occurring in Kananaskis. So I do expect that we will be asked for resources, but not so much in far advance of the date. It'll be closer to the date. And I expect, although I haven't been told, I expect to lose maybe up to 3 members for about a week. That is an estimate, but I think it's a reasonable estimate based on my experience. In which case, we're going to be able to manipulate the schedule so that we have our normal coverage and just have them off the schedule to do that tasking.
Thank you very much. Well, Councillor Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of, actually I have a couple of questions. So last year you had the youth summer program and it seemed to be very successful. Is that in the works for again this summer to get the high school kids back in and introducing them to the RCMP life?
We had discussed it. I know Constable Mitch Price was basically spearheading it. We had borrowed it from Sergeant Jamie Day in Three Hills, who had done it the year before. It does depend on resourcing. It does depend on what we have going on. Now, Constable Price has returned from his community resource officer position since the position changed to a crime reduction unit. And he is returned to his substantive general duties. So it's a matter of him finding the time to do it. We have talked about it. If we don't do it this year, chances are we'll do it in 2026. So we may just do it alternate years. But it was so popular and so well received, I can't imagine us not doing it again. I just can't guarantee it'll be 2025.
How many questions do you have? We have others as well, but go ahead if you only have about a couple. Do you have quite a few?
Just one comment and one question.
That's fair. Go ahead.
I noticed on page 25 of our report, where you talk about the resources overview. Of course, every year, this is the news all over the place. So I'm just curious what the future looks like, local, regionally, and nationally, and through our recruitment programs, that initiatives I know that you talked about in the past, how those seem to be coming along in solving these issues that we have with recruiting and staffing of the positions. I'll say the question first, and then I'll say the comment, and then we can get back to the question. So the comment is really, as you know, I'm a small business owner in Uptown Olds, and we've been plagued for many years with the alley cats, the folks who go through our alleyways. And I've noticed over the past few months, specifically, there has been no people in our alleyways rooting through this or rooting through that. So kudos to whatever you're doing to get those people out of our alleyways and out of the problems that they're causing and the mischief they're doing in our neighborhoods. So I just wanted to make sure that that was recognized. And then to my question.
And it's a very broad question. It's a very big picture question in terms of what the RCMP is doing at a national level. It's not really within my sphere of knowledge as to exactly how they're solving it. I was recently in Depot in December, and I noticed the Depot was probably more full than it had been in a long time. So I think the recruiting efforts are working. Certainly, you know, and not getting too deeply into the weeds, we do have a member that has accepted a transfer, and I have put in the paperwork for his replacement, and I have been talking to staffing, and they're actively looking for first a lateral transfer, or somebody who's already been trained and from another detachment, and if not, then we'll look at getting a cadet. And I feel that, you know, watching other detachments, that the cadets seem to be coming faster than they were maybe a couple of years ago. So I feel like the recruiting is working. I feel like Depot has more cadets than they've had in years past, and I think whatever they're doing is working. So I can't really go on beyond that because that, again, is big picture stuff, and it's not really for me to say.
Thank you for your comments. Councillor Ryan?
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor Dahl, through you to Sergeant Wright. Just a supplemental to Councillor Wilson's comment or question with regards to the G7 and your comment about possibly taking officers off of duty here to go and work there. Would that happen only if you were full complement? Right now, I see that we only have 8 working, so I'm just wondering, is there a level where you can say, okay, we just cannot give those officers because we're already down 3 right now, and so
Right.
what happens then if they take 3 more? That would leave you with a critical shortage, I would think. So
Well-
is there a certain tipping point?
And there is absolutely a tipping point. Right now, we're managing just fine with the absences that are mentioned in the report. 2 of which I know are coming back in April. And actually, yeah, and one of which is accepted the transfer, so we're looking for a backfill. I feel that we will have sufficient resources if they come asking for 3, unless something else happens between now and then. And if that's the case, then myself and my operations NCO would be stating that we cannot go below minimums, which I can't say what that is, but we know what that number is. And just to ensure that the town of Olds and Mountain View County and related communities are adequately and properly serviced. So currently, I think we're in good shape if they do come calling. And again, that 3 is just my educated guess, so.
Very good. Thank you very much. At this time, I would like council to, I would like a motion on the floor, please. Oh, okay, Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Mayor Dahl. I move that council accepts the Royal Canadian Mounted Police quarterly report as presented.
Very good, thank you, and once again, great information. I will call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. All right, to our viewers and our gallery members, thank you very much for your attendance. We will be moving into a closed portion of our agenda. So for those of you joining us via live streaming, the meeting stream will be replaced by a graphic while council is in closed session. When the graphic is removed, that will indicate the meeting is ready to reconvene. I would ask council please for a motion to move to closed. Councillor Cummings?
Before I make the motion, Madam Mayor, who's staying and who's, do we still have to make that in the motion?
Yes, you do have to.
All present? Okay. I move that council move into a closed session under FOIP Section 20, disclosure harmful to law enforcement, and Sections 21, disclosure harmful to intergovernmental relations, for an RCMP update with Director Andrews and Staff Sergeant Wright.
And the time is 3:04 p.m. The motion's on the floor. I call the vote. Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. does council require 5-minute recess? Or is this going to take quite a while? Okay. No, we're good to go then. We can wait. It's Welcome back. We are now, we're in Rise and Report, and we will now deal with item number 1, and I'll ask Councillor Cummings to speak.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I move that council accept the RCMP update as presented.
Thank you, Councillor Cummings. I will call for the vote. Those in favor? That is carried, and I will adjourn the meeting at 3:16 p.m., and thank you for your patience.